first thing we're going to do with our protagonist and antagonist is to pick a set of character traits to describe them. And this will help us keep track of them whenever we're writing about them. We'll know, oh, this is what they're about. These 5 traits are going to be able to tell you everything you need to know about that character, in a sense, on where they're coming from in different situations. So start by picking one best trait and one worst trait for your protagonist and antagonist. And if you have some other main characters you're doing, do those too. A character trait can be anything that determines how the character sees the world, such as if they're a champion wrestler, they're going to see everything like a wrestler, or a football player, they're always going to talk like they're in a huddle, they're always going to be kind of talking like a football game's going on. Or maybe they're really charming, just everything they do is very charming. Maybe they're a warrior and they're always talking about, battles and, things like that. Or they're holy, they're praying all the time, or they're a hippie, or they're an outlaw, or maybe they're really logical and they're always doing math problems. Or maybe they're an airhead and they just don't seem to get things. Maybe they're really fearful and they're always afraid. Or maybe they're insane. Maybe they're an alcoholic and they drink all the time and they're obsessed with drinking. Maybe they're just really happy-go-lucky and nothing really bothers them. Maybe they're a cowboy and they're sort of stuck in this whole cowboy mentality. They wear a hat and little boots and they've got the cowboy thing going on. They listen to country music, they drive a pickup truck. Maybe they're a jock. Maybe they're a businessman, maybe they're a criminal, or maybe they're really shy. Those are character traits you can use. For the best traits, they could be the best skateboarder in the film world, or the champion wrestler, or maybe they're the prettiest or the strongest or the richest. For the worst trait, they could be scared of everything. Maybe they're really negative, or maybe they're stubborn, or maybe they're addicted to chocolate, or something they cannot have easily. So there's a list of possible best traits and worst traits in your PDF workbook if you get stuck. You may want to think of your own best and worst traits to use for this part of the workshop, because you're going to be able to use those better. Or people you know, if they have traits that you're very familiar with, you're going to have an extra edge on getting to those details. Let's talk a little bit about constructing character trait sets that are contrasting and work really well together, because Marlon and Dory have a great set of traits that are quite different, and they play off each other really well for comic relief. And just whenever you're constructing main characters in a story or a film, you really want to keep in mind that they shouldn't be the same. They should be very different, so you get good cop, bad cop. In Marlon and Dory's case, it's more like scared fish, fish with no fear, totally positive fish, so it's kind of negative, positive fish. If we look at Marlon, his best trait is that he's a great father. He's really dedicated to Nemo, and he's going to all this trouble to find him. Dory's best trait is her strange fish knowledge, being able to read and do all these other things. You could also maybe say that her best trait is being fearless, but I think that her strange fish knowledge could also be her best trait. It could be one of those. The worst trait that Marlon has is that he's afraid of everything and anything in the ocean almost, and what happened to his son. He's got like this fear of life, and he's going to lose his only son. This is like the worst thing that could happen to him. So he's got a lot of fear that we see right away after the tragedy at the beginning. Dory's biggest worst trait is her short-term memory problems, which is, once again, a funny worst trait. A universal trait for Marlon is that he's a normal guy dad. Everyone can relate to him. He just seems like very ordinary and kind of vanilla and typical dad. Where the universal trait for Dory is that she's a nutty gal. She's just kind of, you've known people like her, so you can hook into that. Interactions with others, Marlon's very afraid of all the other fish. He's very suspicious and cynical after his experiences with the barracuda earlier. Where Dory's very friendly. She's not afraid of anything in the water. She'll swim up to any fish and start talking to him and asking him for directions, just totally oblivious to any danger that they could pose. So this interaction kind of contrasting trait really works well to show how they deal with other characters in the film world in different ways. A point of view trait, which we touched on briefly, is that Marlon's very negative, has a very fear-based view of reality, where Dory could be called a very positive fish with a very innocent view of the world since she can't remember anything. And even their appearance has a very strong contrast. Marlin's a bright orange clownfish who you can spot in any scene very easily. You can pick him out of the blue background quite easily against the water. And Dory is a bright blue fish, so they both look quite different. Though once again, the traits, Marlin's very courageous. Even though he's afraid, he's got a lot of courage because he just swims out into this ocean and he knows the dangers. He remembers things, so he's got a lot of courage to do this and to go swim across this entire ocean to find his son. That's very much of a courage trait for him, considering what he's been through. Dory's trait on that is that she's fearless. Not only does she have courage, she's just completely fearless. She'll just swim to anyone. Notice how these two characters contrast each other well. You want to look at this, especially with your antagonist and protagonist, but other characters too, like sidekicks or love interests. You want them to be good contrast. You don't want them to be too similar because that'll give you more to play with when they're interacting. So take a moment right now to choose 5 basic traits for your main characters, at least your antagonist and your protagonist. And once again, there's a list in your workbook and little spots to fill in those traits.